stop, I'll go. But that's just, so I used to enjoy that sense of power. All I have to do is step inside the chapel, and this fool would back off. The library, of course, was the other one.
Okay.
And I remember one shortish, stocky fellow, he then decided to invade the sanctuary. But he didn't want to beat me up inside the library. He wanted to drag me out. So a tussle began in the library, because I have this sense, the library is the quiet place. So as we struggled, I remember, he put me so sharply that I was catapulted through the glass door. And I remember I had a huge gash, it bled very profusely, and then he became frightened, and which was very amusing. You see this bully now cowering, because he thought maybe he'd kill me because of all the blood. So of course I enjoyed it. I enjoyed that sense of power over him during that period.
One of your friends, told me 2 days ago that you were never also afraid of snakes. Plenty of snakes in Apata Ganga at that time, but you were one of the people confronting the snakes.
Yeah, because I hated snakes.
I see.
If you like, I was afraid of snakes. And I hated snakes. I thought these slimy creatures. All of us have this superstitious awe of snakes. So for me, since I was afraid of snakes and I considered them dangerous, it was important to kill them. So I used to kill snakes.
Instead of running away?
I prefer to kill them. If you run away, they might, sneak.
When you confronted those bullies, were the authorities behind you?
When I supported?
When you confronted the bullies?
Oh, sometimes, of course, the case would end up with the authorities.
Okay.
And I can't really remember, I think it's only a few times that I was involved in the authorities. I consider it a personal battle.
Okay.
So one which had to be resolved among us. Because one couldn't always depend on the authority. And in any case, the authorities didn't particularly like me. Because I insisted on going my own way in many instances. I'd be where I was not supposed to be. I would argue with teachers. I was very argumentative. In fact, that's why the relations say, this one is good. If you argue, they say you're going to be a lawyer.
Okay.
We sort of among ourselves.
Were you also, very creative in terms of, writing?
Yes. I'm sure I'd be embarrassed to read some of the poems I wrote at that time, but I did write poetry then, and I believe I even won a prize once, a bronze medal at some writing which was organized by the British Council, the rudimentary British Council. No, from the moment I fell in love with language, with the imagination, discover the power of imagination. I began writing short stories, poetry, and essays.
There's an attitude to that hatred for snakes, and I'm having this perception that because you hated them, you needed to find a way to get them out of sight. Is it right to say that you grew up with that kind of thinking, like a problem that you don't like, you have to confront it in a certain way that you get out of the way?
Yeah, there's an attitude that I grew up with, that you must overcome your fear. I mean, my fear was genuine, I'm not just saying it. I was afraid of snakes, and I hated them because they made me afraid of them. And so, one snake less, even when I go hunting, when I see a snake, I spare a bullet for it. Even though I'm not fond of eating snakes, but at least I take it home. There are some people who are passionate about snake meat, passionate.
It's sweet. It's like
I eat them when I'm, with other hunters, but they're not my favorite meat.
Do you still go hunting?
Yeah.
You still do that in these days of Boko Haram?
Well,
with laying people in the bush?
I'll tell you something about my hunting experience in Boko Haram, and this I told the authorities within the fisheries. First of all, I go hunting on my own, which is my favorite, just to disappear in the bush. And then I also go with traditional hunters from time to time. We go all the way to Upper Ogun area. You know, and we used to run into, it was normal to run into the Fulani herdsmen,
Okay.
crossing the bush. And sometimes, friendly. I remember once I shot a guinea fowl when we were hunting, and it fell far. And when I got there, I found, and one of their dogs, some of them had dogs, the dog had picked up the guinea fowl
I see.
and was running with it to his master. I said, "Stop, you thief! Get that dog back here with that guinea fowl quickly." That was the spirit, They would choose, there's a dog which took it, what's wrong? Very friendly. So, in fact, sometimes when you get lost in the bush, as I sometimes did, you listen for a small radio, and that signaled the fact there were some herdsmen around, and you followed the sound until you found your way again. So it was a very good relationship. Over the past few years, I began to notice that the character of the herdsmen had changed. They were different people, very surly, very hostile, really, really aggressive. And I would say to our fellow hunters, these are not our regular herdsmen. No, something is going on. It was one of the reasons I asked for that meeting with Aziza, which I mentioned in one of my interviews in London. And he confirmed that something was happening, and that he was in fact coming from the States, where he'd gone to negotiate helicopters. So I was very relieved. I said, good, as long as you know, that's all. But after one or two encounters, anytime we went deep, we didn't just go with shotgun and low caliber, small caliber rifles, just in case. We also changed our modus operandi in the bush, because something was happening. Something was happening, it's very, very clear. And as I said, confirmed that. But all it meant was that when you went in the bush, you were a bit more careful. You didn't go to certain areas, a bit circumscribed. So I can't let people come and deprive me of one of the few pleasures I have in life.
Were you ever confronted with, by a dangerous animal like a lion or?
No, not in these areas. But I'll tell you the most dangerous, what I consider animal in that place: the tuku, the wild boar.
Okay.
The wild boar. Those things can be dangerous. I've seen them seize a dog, with its tuskers and fling it the dog. So that's even more dangerous than Efon. Efon is, as long as the Efon, the sort of equivalent of buffalo, as long as it's not injured, but if it's injured, then the hunters all go out to kill it, because then it becomes a real menace in the bush.
Is it true that your 2 years at the University of Ibadan, you spent making trouble for the authority, and as a campus journalist, and more importantly, as Captain Blood in the Pyrates Confraternity?
Well, let's deal with all this subject. The saddest thing about Nigeria is that once the people, simply because I think it's not that people hate knowledge or truth, really. It's just that they find truth very inconvenient when they're on the warpath. They feel everything goes, including slander, including distortion, including a lacuna in the transmission of information. The Pyrates Confraternity was never a cult. There's a difference between a cult and a fraternity. And you journalists, in fact, I blame you for failing to educate the public about that distinction. There's this distinction, there's absolutely, virtually no correlation between a cult and a fraternity. If you want to know what cults are, go to the old way. go to the what's the Itakoto, there's another one. Something. Go to what fraternities have become. Go to what some fraternities, I should say, have become. Cults. But the Pyrates Confraternity was never a cult. It was a mischievous group. Shagari, you go all the way back to, no, not Shagari, I beg your pardon, Tafa Balewa.
Okay.
When he came to visit the university, the authorities there invited the Pyrates Confraternity to help in welcoming him with their, what do they call it? It's not gyrations. Gyrations is the Kegites. Kegites, yes. With their colorful dress, they welcomed the president,
The prime
minister, into campus.
Okay.
In later years, when Obasanjo was head of state and he visited campus, by which time, because traveled on. But in spite of being considered sometimes troublesome and excessive, the Pyrates Confraternity welcomed him and inducted him into the Pyrates Confraternity.
Yeah, I see.
So it was a light. It's what students should be doing. It's what students do everywhere in the world. And so I find it horribly dishonest, very dishonest when those who should know better, because many people have been actually inducted into what they consider is the truth about any fraternity. In the United States, as we've said repeatedly, many presidents, there's hardly any president of the United States who did not belong to a fraternity. For the simple reason that fraternities are part and parcel of campus culture, recognized, respected. Of course, sometimes they overdid it, they are anti-establishmentarianism, if you like, and then they became wild, or sometimes they get drunk, but they offended the same way as, other individuals and groups and clubs in university, do all the time, and they get punished. And that's normal. It's when the outside world began to infiltrate campuses and induct individual, members into their own vile, cultic mentality, especially at political time. Yes. Oh, are those more?
Good morning.
Okay.
That was when the bad and really execrable habits began. That's when they became cultic. That's when they became antisocial, not just antisocial, but criminally so. Take my name, for instance. Let me now tell you. One of the Pyrates Confraternity was the first to, well, first of all, that came, of course, from the book, the fiction, one of the, ancient pirates of the high seas. There's a slogan, however, which sometimes you hear from the Pyrates Confraternity: "Blood for blood," which is part of the sort of sinister image which Pyrates Confraternity has. But what did it mean? The Pyrates Confraternity, when blood donations began, it began in this country. It began around 54. I think it began about 53. That's the first time the introduction of the building of a blood bank into here.
You were still in UR.
Yes, and you are. Yeah, of course. And so the Pyrates Confraternity undertook to be among the first donors of blood. And the slogan then was "Blood for Captain Blood." Yeah, go and donate blood.
Okay.
Go and donate blood.
All right.
It's a pity we don't keep records here. But when the first mobile blood collection came to Nigeria and came to campus, we were among the first, if not the very first, to donate blood. Until today, you find the Pyrates Confraternity adopting motherless children from motherless homes, going to give free medical treatment, adopting constituencies, for instance, in Lagos. You find the Pyrates Confraternity assisting NDLA, go and check out the records, as a group. And of course, they were the first volunteers for the road safety corps, whatever, the civilian. They've been integral to society. If I tell you how many governors are Pyrates Confraternity, how many are even very close to Aso Rock, if not directly in Aso Rock. They're in the military, they're in immigration, they just do their own thing. Of course, they're eccentric. It's only eccentric people who go to Pyrates Confraternity. Eccentric. And so that eccentricity frightens people. You feel, okay, why are you going to the bush to go and dance? What's wrong with going to the bush to go and dance? The bush is all around us. I want a quiet place where people can drink, even get drunk, without disturbing anyone. Now, having said that, it must be admitted, and this, of course, internal reformation, that sometimes on campus, some of them used to go excessive and try to interfere with in the lives of others. There was a time, for instance, when some pirates, all this I'm talking about the development years after we had left, long after we had left. There was no interference in the life of students during that period. But as they grew in numbers and so on, anytime they were parading, they would ask people, they would insist that other people switch off their lights. For me, that was absolutely wrong and intolerable and unacceptable. So there were incidents like that. Don't imagine that I'm painting a spotless picture of Paris. No, never. There were excesses, and some of them will get very drunk. All right? But you will never hear, if you find one, tell me, find a pirate who engaged in rape, who engaged in acid throwing, as has become common among the mimic associations. Black Axe, Sisters of Jezebel, because then even the women began their own cults and tried to prove that they were more macho than the men. That is what has happened. And what society really should do is to teach one another the truth about the original fraternity. And that way learn to separate the evil cults from the genuine fraternities. But no, because Wole Soyinka is involved. The moment I fight one government and they say, look at him, he founded a secret cult, people butchering one another on campus. Even this stupid young man who thought he could talk about me talking, Abacha's son.
Oh, sure.
In that restaurant, he said, somebody who started an evil cult, he should go and repair that before he talks about my father. This son of a killer, of a murderer, and a cultist, incidentally. If you don't believe he's a cultist, go and ask the man who took over shortly after he did, Obasanjo. Go and ask Obasanjo what they found around the Aso Rock.
I see.
Go and ask Obasanjo's private chaplain when he went to stay in what used to be Abacha's go and ask Obasanjo's Islamic family. So when people talk about politics, I feel very sorry for them. I'm denigrated because they are allowing the children who go to college to miss some of the fun and disciplinary recourses within campus. Of course, Pyrates Confraternity is no longer on campuses. When the confusion became intolerable, I told them, get out of all campuses. Just you are adults now. Leave the students, when they come out, if they want to come and join you, when they've learned the truth, let them join you. But get out of campuses, because they were constantly being attacked. You know, people didn't like the fact that the Pyrates Confraternity had stayed true to course, and that therefore they were respected by across many areas of society. Forget all the denigrators. And so I said, just leave that place. If the universities cannot deal with the aberrants, don't let them continue to confuse you with the rapists, acid throwers, with the arm robbers. I did this documentary, as you know, which was incomplete because unfortunately we couldn't find the first breakaway group to speak to us. They were so afraid. The Buccaneers, because we wanted to track what happened to confraternities. Why did they degenerate to such a level? And the first group to break away, or more or less, who were expelled, because they were made up of those who were flouting the rules and the conduct of Pyrates Confraternity. So the Buccaneers were the first to break it. You know, we couldn't get one person to speak. They were so afraid. You're talking about so-called fraternities, members of which went into classrooms at examination time, dragged out their victim and scalped them. Two young men at one time agreed to meet us. You know, I was with the Channel 4 of the BBC. Camera, and they agreed to meet us. This boy was so afraid. He was looking around all the time. He picked a place where nobody could talk. In the end, it was useless. We couldn't get any material from him because he would begin to say a sentence and he'd choke up. He was just scared that even being seen just talking to the camera and such, that is what cults have become. The fraternities have become. And it's important to make that distinction, you know. Important to make. Many parents have come to me and said, oh, we didn't know that there was a genuine fraternity among them, and apologized, you know, admitted freely that they've been fed garbage. You know?
Sure.
I remember Onobrakweya, for instance, his son, not Onobrakweya, Abeokuta, the artist, Abeokuta. Yeah, I remember his son, who was a pirate, and he saw a photograph in the papers of Eyo,
Masquerade.
And that picture was placed close to something about fraternity. So he thought this was a secret cult, you know, and that this was a fraternity. So we ran into each other, and I said, no, these are your people. It's not, you know, something. And he just said, what? Who are the pirates exactly? He said, because my son is a pirate, and I've told him he'd better get out of there or get out of my house. So I said, let me give you the history. And he went, I said, go and check records, go and check our UI, the book which was compiled. By testimonies by Ogunselo, there people, go and see what they talked, how they talked at the time. He said, sorry, Mr. Namani, the former speaker,
Senate President?
The Senate President, similar, we're great friends. And he also was under this thing. They've been so bombarded by negative news. He came, he addressed the confraternity in Abuja, was a material. They give seminars, they educate people. But if people want to believe in the sinister picture, look, let them do that.
Now, okay.
Well, let me just add that one of the reasons, in fact, why I think it's important to speak about this subject is that during the Abacha period, both outside, you know, Pyrates Confraternity also has chapters outside, all the way to Japan, US, everywhere, you know. And those who were here at the time, some of them suffered a lot, were tortured, detained, tortured, simply because of their association with Wole Soyinka, even though I'm not an active member. But the simple reason that they were disconnected with Wole Soyinka, the pirates were captured and locked up and flogged with chains every day and starved. And yet, they were part and parcel of the struggle against Abacha. So when I read about, something, Abacha's song, talking about his father, the torturer, knew the truth. So you should go and ask his father, whatever he is, before he opens the mouth to talk about Pyrates Confraternity.
No, there are some religious organizations that have this kind of akin modes of worship, and there are things that they do that appear to be similar, just as you mentioned, that you could go to the bush and then you want to dance and have some time there with yourselves, and then that was such things were misinterpreted.
Yeah,
Now,
it's not
what are the areas of conversion? How were your activities similar to some of these churches or?
No. The Pyrates Confraternity is anything but religious. You bring whatever religion you have into it. Nobody attempts to convert you. Nobody says, come on. No! Again, there's, bush. People get scared of the bush. I live in the bush half the time. My house is built inside the bush. I love nature. And there are people like that, When Boy Scouts march into the bush and go and camp as part of their personality builder, nobody says the Boy Scouts are cowards. People should stop being frightened. Anyway, this bush we're talking about is just next door to in UI. You just walk a little bit and you find some space there. So if you're walking past, you will see these people dancing there. But there's another important difference, which I think I should go. Religions are not cults, but there are cults within religion. But religion has nothing cultic about it. Orishaoko, which is a god of fertility, and therefore god of, not god of fertility, but the god of the moist elements and plants, farms, and so on, Orishaoko, the deity of the farms. Where else do you want to find its symbols? Of course, on the farms, except of course in museums also, which collect them. So there are cults within religions. Boko Haram has become a cult. It's not Islam. Boko Haram is not Islam, but it stems from, it's quote unquote, I don't want to abuse the word, but it's raison d'etre, it's a reason for existence, where it claims to derive its authority from. It's from Islam. But it's Boko Haram, Islam, it's been denounced by religious leaders, everywhere in this country and so on. It acts in a cultic way, secretive way. And it justifies itself, its activities, from a distortion of Islam. That's exactly the relationship, it's the same relationship between the philosophy of Pyrates Confraternity and the breakaway cultic existence. A total distortion, desecration of high-minded principles. So within religions, yes, you sometimes find cults, and they're there all over the place, and they will say they derive their authority from the Bible. They will even quote the Bible. There's something very cultic about Alice Lakwena's group, aggressive group, very similar to Boko Haram. So when we talk about cults and Boko Haram and so on, fundamentalism, we're not talking merely of one religion. We're talking about the phenomenon of evil cults, anti-human cults, deriving from texts and waving the text aloft as justification. You extract what you want, you manipulate it, you distort it, you then make it the sole principle, and then you claim authority from the originating source. This is the problem of society, and that's something which people have to be educated about very carefully. Those who want to be educated, those who want to learn.
When you graduated from the University of Leeds, with a 2-1, and I'm emphasizing that because
Yeah, I know.
you know,
All kinds of things.
all kind of stories about him making the pass and all that.